Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation to join the conference Novelties in Sports Sciences International Scientific Conference. And the topic I will address today deals with the martial arts. And the title of my presentation is Parallels and Divergences, a comparative analysis of martial arts and Western sport ethics. In this presentation, I will try to develop a reflection on the ethics of martial arts, born in another context, such as that of Eastern culture and philosophy, from a philosophical and pedagogical perspective, aimed at highlighting possible parallels, similarities, and differences with Western philosophy and ethics. I will try to get to the core of martial arts ethics in order to understand first whether this ethics is really a sport ethics, um, and so I will try to answer the first question: is this ethics, the ethics of martial arts, really a sports ethics? That is to say, an ethics that refers to generally sports disciplines, since martial arts is a locution referring to Mars, god of wars. And the second question is, the second question I will try to answer is this ethics different from Western ethics and Western sports codified in the West as the athletic sports of antiquity, the competitive sports, and the team sports born with English pedagogues of the 19th century, in particular with Thomas Arnold? That's the second question. And the goal of my presentation is to provide the floor with some minimal tools to approach and understand from a scientific philosophical perspective the ethics of martial arts. Among other things, reflection on martial arts ethics can be an interesting philosophical exercise in understanding other culture, those of the Eastern world, that are often left out in the teaching of philosophy and history in our school and university. And what are the main characteristics of so-called Oriental sports? The sport we call Oriental disciplines have a large philosophical and ethical religious component. Oriental disciplines have not experienced the process of secularization that has been a constant in the evolution of Greek athleticism, reinterpreted secularly by Coubertin with so-called religio athleta. The concept of ethics and morality are fundamental to understanding martial arts ethics. The ethics is a philosophy, so the philosophy of which refers to the study of ethics, values, and norms of our behaviors, sports behaviors. And morality is something dealing with the way we evaluate, take into considerations, and the behaviors, and we see them as positive or negative, or acceptable or not acceptable. So morality differs from ethics because morality refers more to to our behaviors, and the way a society, a community accepts or not accepts the rules and the behaviors of a person. Indeed, martial arts always move between a set of behaviors oriented by reflection and personal philosophical exercise and a public moral. So a public morality based on appearance and sense of community, or at least based on the community's own perception of that particular set of behaviors. These personal ethics and public morals are characterized by a core represented by three fundamental components, which are philosophical and religious at the same time, that have contributed to the construction of the specific values of which the martial arts are bearers. First component is represented by Hinduism, which comes from India. So the land where Western philosophy, understood as the exercise of body on body, found the concept of ascesis, that is to say, so-called asceticisms. The second component is Confucianism, and Taoism and Zen Buddhism. From this component, the martial arts have come to the martial arts ethics, the values concerning the search for the way toward the building of a community harmonious and pacified, and from the exaltation of the self, the search for the exploration of the sense of limitation and human empowerment. The third component of martial arts, from a philosophical point of view, is represented by Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, its Japanese variant. Thus, a more modern and actualized form of Buddhism that dates back to the 19th century, basically because it was elaborated in the late 17th, 18th, and 19th century. From this component come the main contemporary values of martial arts, specifically for karate, judo, and kung fu. The third component of the martial arts is summed up by the concept of do, a very interesting term meaning way, an almost untranslatable term in Italian and in other languages whose better translation would perhaps be virtue. That is to say, the pursuit of a way of life, even so it can be translated do, and the cultivation of the personal self of individual excellence for honor, for oneself and for the community. The do, in fact, expresses a range of values very similar to those of Greek arietism, that is, the pursuit of virtue and excellence while respecting the values of community and boundary. And from Do comes the bulk of the most widespread martial arts values. Do, we find it in words like dojo. Jo means place. Do means way, indicating the place where one practices for the pursuit and realization of the way, which I will not briefly discuss, which I will now briefly discuss. We also find it in words like Bushido, the way of Bushi. Bushido can be translated as virtue, way of knights. Bushi were warriors, knights, who in the 18th and 19th century Japan inspired their lives by respect for the values of honesty, loyalty, justice, duty, and honor, which are to be pursued to the death. This is very interesting because the concept of Bushido is very similar to the Roman concept of mos. For example, for the Bushido, there's an ethics of an acceptability of surrender, and the quest for an honorable death in combat drove many suicide bombers to sacrifice, for example, in Japan during the Second World War. So there are lots of connection with the ancient ethics of Bushido, for example. Bushido, that is to say, the way, the art of Do, the art of the way, is based on 7 fundamental concepts to which the warrior knight must be scrupulously adhere: honesty and justice, Ji, Yu, heroic courage, Jin, compassion, Rei, kind courtesy, Makoto, complete sincerity, Meiyo, honor, Chuji, duty and loyalty. So the dojo, for example, etymologically it means place where the one follows the way, the do. Originally, the term inherited from the Chinese Buddhist tradition denoted the place where the Buddha obtained awakening, and by extension the places set aside for religious practices in the Buddhist temples. The term was later adapted in the military world and was influenced by the Zen tradition. Therefore, it is to this day widespread in martial arts circles. So Budo is the Japanese martial way. The term is composed of the kanji ideograms Bu and Do, which can be translated as martial way, way of war, or way leading to peace, way leading to the cessation of war through disarmament. So, from this short introduction to the term connected to Do in Japanese and Eastern martial arts, we can derive some similarities between East and West. On this principle and values from the different inputs, the ethics of martial arts have been built sustainably over time substantially, sorry, over time. The similarities with the ethics of Western sports are many. The code of Bushido, for example, is then so different from the chivalrous ethics that inspire Pierre de Coubertin's Olympic ethics sports ethics. He too felt he was, in fact, a Bushi. We can say that de Coubertin was a Bush. However, there is another problem that arises from an ethical point of view. Are martial arts, being the arts of war, sports, or do they instead pose a serious problem in ethical terms because they are the arts of wars, the art of violence, of cultivating violence, and not engaged in developing a process which leads to peace? That's the second question. This the one of the most relevant ethical question that arises from what we have just said about Bushido. For Christian theology, there are immoral sports. For example, motoring, boxing, combat sports are considered immoral by the church. Why? Because why are they immoral for the Catholic Church and the Christian Church? Because they are inherently careers of violence. But this is a mistake made by the Christian theology. This is wrong. The theologians reveal their ignorance. However, this reflection also makes us realize how martial arts and combat sports ethics is so important. To understand why martial arts are not activities connected to violence, we have to make a fundamental distinction between aggressiveness and violence. We have to start from the statement that sport can never be violent. Violence is the negation of sport. Where there is violence, there is immediately no sport. So there immediately ceases to be sport. If anything, sport can present for a variety of reasons a restrictive form of aggression, perhaps caused by the need to often survive the stress of competition itself, or instrumental aggression, unconscious or unintentional. Yes, this can happen in sport. This can be present into the sports, in the practice of sport. But this is aggressivity, not violence. In fact, when instrumental aggressiveness becomes conscious and causes physical and mental harms to the other intentionally, then we are faced with violence. So aggressiveness is different from violence because aggressiveness is something natural in the human being, but violence, no. Violence is a product of culture, is an incorrect way of conceiving the relation with others. So violence bases on the intention of destroying and destroying the other, and the concept of destroying the others cannot match the values, the values of sports. Sport is in itself something which is against violence, and the most relevant concept capable of summing up the treasure inside sports is the concept of fair play. Fair play is really the box which contains all the values, the intrinsic and extrinsic value of the sport. So violence is against the fair play, that is to say, the the synthesis of all the values of sports. So, for example, in the sports system, there are always referees, competition judges, and ethical systems and respect for the norms, which convey the values of sport through education. And all this system, the system of referees, the system of judging in the sports, serve actually to ensure that instrumental aggression does not turn into violence and destroy the values of sports, a human practice. So, from this statement, we can derive the mistakes that the theologians, the Catholic the Christian theologian sometimes made about sports, ignoring that sport is something against the values. Here in martial arts, because of their historical and cultural origin, we have talked about Bushido. The boundary is delicate. It seems very weak. This boundary very quick to be passed through. In fact, it's well marked by sound ethics whose values are transmitted through education. And so the values in education, like in sports, are always transmitted by the by the by the master in the sports, by the trainer, by the coach, and in education by the teacher and the educators, and so on. If a master does not convey these values, or in his teaching or her teaching conveys values, actually these values that are more an incitement to confrontation or combat in the warlike sense of the word and not agonality, then she is not a martial arts master nor a combat sport coach. Martial arts and combat sports based on fair play bring to life with their ethical philosophical system what we might call a pedagogy and ethics of the human person in its entirety. Therein lies their very high ethical, pedagogical, and social values. However, the need for adequate training of masters and experts, coaches of these arts and sports in all contexts and levels and geographical urban areas of our country should be emphasized. So, how can we derive a pedagogy of combat sports from the considerations we have just developed in our previous in the previous slides we have presented. Martial arts and combat sports are in fact the concrete example of our war-related practice can be transformed into an extraordinary good for humanity. Starting from war-related practices with philosophical and religious graphs, through a sound pedagogical structure of transmitting values to an ethical structure of ethical control of aggression and limitation, and by leveraging the enhancing potential of human beings' physical self, humankind has created one of the most extraordinary forms of sports practice in its history. Martial arts and combat sports, in fact, are all about this. They embody a living and concrete pedagogy and ethics of non-violence that have in Do and Agon, a Greek term which means assembly from agon, which for the ancient Greeks was competition. So competition was translated by the Greeks through the word agon, or better, we translate by the term competition, the Greek term agon. They express it as a lifestyle centered on ethics, respect for rules, and respect for others. So the ethical and social values of combat sports comes from the unity of the mind with the body, overcoming the split between ethics and morality, between individual behavior and public image, between fair play, righteousness, nonviolence, respect and courtesy for others, loyalty to one's family, friends and country, and tolerance for those with different ideas. These are just some of the martial arts values that coaches, masters, and students experience every day in their daily practice of the sports. Martial arts and combat sports, in fact, bring to fruition through the specific education and teaching that characterizes them on the ethical basis marked by law, the values related to being a good citizen, honest and respectful of one's community with high moral and social virtues. So students observe their teachers and instructors, their coaches, their masters, by seeing them as people who are supposed to have and must necessarily have attained a higher level of conscience and morality. They are seen as people of high disciplines, the masters in martial arts and so on, and skills. So this is very important because the very essence, the very pedagogical and ethical essence of sport and games is in the personal arete, that personal virtue that the masters or the teachers, the instructors in the martial arts is capable of showing to their students. The four teachers, masters, coaches in martial arts must always be aware of their social responsibilities and the profound influence they have on students and their athletes, who will tend to imitate their behavior and attitudes by trying to be like them. These are the great qualities of the masters and the coach that represent the ethical and pedagogical basis of the whole ethical and educational system of martial arts and combat sports and sports disciplines. If a master training does not have these qualities at the highest level, the results can be disastrous, because the very principle that transforms into values the implicit aggression that martial arts as combat sports nonetheless possesses because of their inherent historical and sociocultural nature. In conclusion, so from martial arts and combat sports comes to us a great ethical and pedagogical lessons, that of humbleness. Humbleness that is at the basis of human education, at the basis of that always learning that represents not only the very meaning of our lives, but also the attitude with which we should place ourselves in the world, in our relationship with others, place ourselves. And so it's in this humbleness that lies the whole ethical value of martial arts and combat sports. And they are teaching us to be better every day, to give our best always and at all times, as should be the case in any other sport, for the benefit of the human community and the common good that comes with it. Thank you for your attention.